Hello and welcome to this, the 15th of Ovid's Heroides. I can't believe how far we've got through. There are only 21. And scholars tend to think the last 6, and sometimes even this one as well, were added later. But I said I'd do them, so I'll do them. Actually, I didn't, did I? I said I'd do them through lockdown, and that's sort of over. And this has just become a kind of weird Stockholm syndrome in which every week I just do you a poem and you feel obliged to watch it. I'm sorry it's happened like this. Anyway, sorry about that. This is a really unusual poem because this poem is from Sappho to Phaon, who is a ferryman who she has the hots for. Now, there are a few things we might want to discuss before we go any further. The first is that Sappho, unlike all these other women, was real. She was a real historical figure, kind of. I mean, we know virtually nothing about her. We have almost no biographical information about her. We know that she was alive. She wrote poetry. We've only got fragments of it. She wrote 9 books of lyric poetry. We've only got 3, I think, sort of roughly foolish poems. The rest are all tiny fragments. Some of them are just a single word or a couple of words. Most of her work doesn't survive. You can find out way more about her. We did an episode of Natalie Haynes Stands Up for the Classics on her, which is available on BBC Sounds. My special guests were Professor Edith Hall, Stella Duffy, and the band Little Machine. So it was an incredibly fun show, given that I had to get 28 minutes out of but so often that's the case. At least this time we actually didn't know, as opposed to me just not having done any homework. So it's interesting that Ovid is treating her as a mythological figure because, she's not. She is not the same as Helen of Troy, and yet for the purposes of this version of her story, she is. She's on a par with those women, those mythological women. So Sappho is already occupying a really strange kind of liminal status between real and mythic. And perhaps more surprising to us than this sort of legending of Sappho is the fact that she's writing to a man named Phaon. There has been a great deal of debate about Sappho's sexuality because we only have these fragments of her poems. So we don't know if she's in character when she writes poems to men, wedding poems, for example. Is she composing those for other people? We know that she had a daughter. We think that she loved women. She was certainly geographically lesbian, by which I mean she was from the island of Lesbos. Not that she was only good at finding women on hillsides and somehow no men ever appeared. But she had a daughter. I guess we would probably say bisexual, but that's quite an anachronistic term. The point of Sappho, as I think Stella pointed out very brilliantly when we made the Radio 4 programme about her, is that essentially we tend to bring our own subtext to her, and she tends to reflect what we want to see in her. I tend to see her as bisexual, I guess, but other people probably feel differently. So there it is. There is obviously a history of homosexual erasure in scholarship, and perhaps Ovid is doing that here. Perhaps he is making, history's most celebrated lesbian be in love with a man because that suits his purposes better. Obviously, for this set of poems, it does. But there were plenty of mythological women he could have chosen that he doesn't. So it seems like an odd choice if it comes out of nowhere. As I say, there are fragments of poetry which seem to suggest that Sappho felt lust and desire for men, but are they persona? I don't know. I don't know, and anyone who tells you they know is either a great deal more knowledgeable or a great deal less honest than I am. So there it is. Anyway, Ovid's version of Sappho pines for the beautiful man Phaon. But she starts, Ovid has her start, by explaining that she's writing elegiac poetry. She's writing in the elegiac metre, as opposed to lyric poetry, for which Sappho herself was famous. And the reason that she gives is that she's really upset, and that's suitable. Grief is suitable for elegy, and the lyre isn't suitable for grief. It's also, of course, because Ovid likes to write in elegy and not in lyrics. So but that's a perfect illustration of why it's so hard to conclude biographical details about Sappho from this poem. Who knows if Ovid is simply making it up because it suits his purposes rather than because it reflects anything that people knew about her. We just don't know for sure. In line 9, she says, "Auror, I burn." It's a word that we've had in others of these poems, but I wonder here if it's a little hat tip to the fact that Sappho wrote some incredible kind of first-person experiences of love, which made it seem like a disease. You're burning, you have fever, and all those love songs which we might know from our lifetimes, the idea of it being an illness, you give me fever, that, it seems, I think, to begin with Sappho. So I hope that it's a little hat tip to that, where she says it here. None of her ex-girlfriends please her now, she says. Not Anactoria, not Athis. These are girls whose names appear in Sappho's poetry. And obviously Ovid had a lot more of Sappho's poetry to look at than we do. A great deal more of it survived to him than survives to us. And she says, these girls don't mean anything to her anymore, and nor do the other 100 girls she loved. I'm loving Sappho right now. She says she loved them without reproach. In some versions of the text, hic sine crimine, or with reproach. Some of the versions of the text read non sine crimine, the literal opposite meanings. And I think this is a really interesting early example of perhaps some sort of, is the text damaged and therefore there are these variations because the text just got damaged? Did it get eaten by mice? Did, moths attack it? Or is the text damaged here because some helpful scribe was trying to bowdlerize the text and say, oh, she can't have loved women without any reproach at all. Let's say with lots of reproach, because loving women for women is a terrible thing to be. We don't know. We don't know. But it's an interesting idea. I like to read it. I think the with reproach reading is more attested. We have more sources suggesting that they were earlier. I think if there is some reproach, perhaps it's coming from that 100 girls she chucked over for Phaon. I like to think they suddenly realised how many of them there were and that she'd given up on them all. That seems to me a nicer version of it, but of course we can't say for sure. Anyway, her wanton affection, the whole lot, now belongs to Phaon, she tells us, and he's left her. She wonders, this bit is so painful to read, I think, she wonders if it's because she's too dark-skinned for his taste, and maybe he's gone to look for a paler girl. But she remembers Andromeda and how Perseus was very into Andromeda, and Andromeda is from Ethiopia, I think. So, she knows that she did seem beautiful to Phaon when she was reading him her poetry. So then he found her lovely. And it's not just because he was impressed by her talent. I love this interplay with Sappho all the way through this poem, that she knows Phaon admired her skill, but she's desperate to remember that he also desired her as a woman. He also liked her kisses, and line 48, he liked her jokes as well. What boy doesn't like a girl who makes jokes in bed? I say, I'll never know, happily. But he's gone to Sicily without her, line 52. This is a long poem, so I'm going to skip an awful lot of it, for which I am sorry. But if you think this one is long, the next one. She talks about her father dying when she was 6, and ugly rows with her brother. Again, is this true? Is this Ovid's invention? Yeah, who knows? Is this biographical information we can conclude about Sappho? We just don't know. She doesn't have anyone to dress up for, she says. She doesn't feel strongly. She doesn't feel like she's got enough strength to deal with this life. She feels like she's been given the wrong kind of thread by the 3 sisters who spin the threads of our lives. She hasn't got enough energy for the life that she's ended up with. I can't imagine how that feels. Phaon has left her with nothing but hurt, she says, line 103. And, now he's left her, she doesn't even feel she can grieve. Her brother, she doesn't get on with her brother. Her brother says she can't grieve because her daughter's fine, her daughter's alive. And so anything else she wants to moan about, she can't. Well, good news for parents. I'm sure that makes you all feel a lot better. And then she tells an interesting story of bumping into a naiad. She's in a forest and her hair's going everywhere, for those of you who are keeping tabs with every single poem which mentions someone having messy hair. It's pretty much all of them. She bumps into a naiad, and the naiad tells her she can get, as a sort of nymph, she can get rid of the pain of unrequited love by lobbing herself in the sea, because that's what Deucalion did. Deucalion is Greek myth's version of Noah. And this sort of fits in with the tradition that there is of Sappho throwing herself to her death, throwing herself to the sea. She doesn't want to die, though. Line 191, she says, I'd much rather press my breast to yours than hurl it from some rocks. A good choice for us all to make, I think. But, and this, I think, is the real problem. She says, dolor artibus obstat, grief has blocked my art. So she can't work. She can't write poetry anymore because she's too unhappy. The idea that, being miserable gives you something to write about, well, not always true, we can say. So all the girls of Lesbos want her poetry. I think we can assume that poetry here is standing in, not just her poetry, but her desire. But Phaon has taken it. And then, oh God, so great, in line 204, she says, oh, I nearly said my Phaon. And she corrects herself because she knows that he's not hers. So she wants Phaon back, both because she wants him and because she wants to be able to compose poetry again. I think that's really the secret of... Oh, sorry, you don't normally see that. This is my page weight to keep a book open for you. Just a bit of backstage information for you there, in case you're wondering. So, if you want to see an image of what this looks like, you could, when we're allowed back into museums, go to Manchester's art gallery and see Charles August Mengen's portrait of Sappho. She's painted standing, looking very grumpy on a rock by the sea, looking like she's giving some serious thought to lobbing herself into it. I will see you next week for something entirely shocking and out of character. A poem from a man. Poem 16 is from Paris to Helen, so who knows what's going to happen next. But it's extremely long, so I'll be doing it very briefly, I'm afraid. Thank you so much for being here. I will see you for poem 16. Bye for now.